You're listening to Learning Leader Spotlight, interviews with corporate L&D leaders. On each episode, we sit down with key industry experts to discover more about what's happening in the world of learning and development, from current trends and insights to the most valuable lessons learned along the way. Join us for a fresh perspective on all things training and the best direction forward. Here's your host, Leanne Langford.
Hi, welcome to Learning Leader Spotlight, the podcast where we interview the learning leaders of today to help the learning leaders of tomorrow. I'm your host, Leanne Langford. I'm the president of Training Pros. Training Pros is a learning and development contract staffing company where we like to say, when you have more projects than people, let us help you find the right consultant to start your project with confidence. I'm really excited about my guests today. We had a really fun conversation a few weeks ago, and I think it's going to be a fun conversation today. Join me in welcoming Chrissy Medeck, the Senior Director of Organizational Development at Ascension. Welcome, Chrissy.
Hi, Leanne. Thanks for having me.
I am thrilled to have you. Chrissy, let's just start off and introduce you to our audience by having you share a 60-second overview of who you are and what you do.
Sure, absolutely. So like you mentioned, I'm a Senior Director of Organizational Development for Ascension. I lead 3 teams. One is focused on our leadership and development programs that we offer nationwide. The second one oversees the building of on-demand learning. And then the third team focuses on delivering those experiences. So it's a wonderful role. I think if I could put it in a different way, my role and the role of my teams, we help our employees grow and really perform at their best. And that could be that we're helping them learn a new skill to expand in their current role, or it could be that we're also helping build a skill set to elevate them into their next role, whether that's a bigger role or it's a role in a different function.
That is a great way to put it, and it sounds like you have a very large responsibility there at Ascension.
It's all wonderful. It's all wonderful people, incredible culture, and I know that it kind of comes across when you talk to me, but I love the work that we do so very much.
That's great. When you love what you do, right?
Yeah.
Well, what is it, speaking of loving what you do, what is it about learning and development that attracted you to the field? How'd you get here?
Oh, that's such a good question. I'll go back a little ways here, and I'm thinking my story is not necessarily unique, but I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and I wanted to be a teacher. And I always thought that meant teaching, elementary, middle, high school in a classroom. I quickly realized I didn't have the patience for that. So I ended up, going to college, majoring in public relations, and I got a job in the enrollment department for a local university, and it was called University of Phoenix. And that role was so pivotal for me because I got to engage every day with adults who hadn't had the opportunity to get an education and were trying to go back to school. And when you see someone who's really, really focused on learning a new skill, and you see them get that insight from their classes, and you see the pride when they walk across the stage with the degree that sometimes they're the first person in their family to get, that just ignited this passion for me in the entire envelope of adult learning, like the entire, I was going to say umbrella of adult learning. And I wasn't sure then how that would manifest for me into a career. But what ended up happening was a few years later, I applied to become an adjunct faculty member and teach college at night. So I got to teach some of the adult learners that I initially got to help enroll into school. And it was incredibly satisfying. And that then was when I knew that that's what I wanted my career to be. I wanted to pivot into the world of learning and development. So then it became, well, how do I make this my full-time job? And how do I translate the skills that I have into the space that I want to be in. And that was the beginning of it.
So it's a great story. It's not completely typical of her, similar, but it's definitely an interesting story. And I love that you were basically following passion with your career choices.
That's such a good way to put it in. I really am. I saw something I liked, decided that's what I wanted to do, and then it became almost a problem solving of, well, how do I get there? How do I bridge the gap between where I am today and where I want to be? And I think that's where a lot of our listeners are probably at. If you're listening to this and you're saying, I want to do something new and different, you're absolutely not alone. And that's the beauty of figuring out your skill set and your passion and figuring out how to go from where you're at today to where you want to be.
Well put, and I'm sure a lot of people were taking notes on that one. So you've been in L&D a while. What are the most impactful changes you've seen in the last few years in our field?
Okay, learning and development is so fascinating because if you're not in the field, you may think that it doesn't shift and change that much. And that is so far from the truth. Learning shifts consistently. And part of my role as a learning and development professional is keeping up with it, current trends, and then what's coming. One of the biggest catalysts for change was the pandemic. If I'm thinking about major shift, because what happened was, a little over 5 years ago, so much of learning was happening in person, formally in a classroom. And then you went overnight to learning shifting to being virtual and being on demand. And that opened up so many doors for change. The biggest shifts I've seen from that. So if we think of that being the catalyst of this major change in learning, a couple of the things I've seen is what I call an introduction of learning in the flow of work. And what I mean by that is it's great sometimes to take a class and enroll in a class and wait for a class. There are many more times that I've got a learning need and I need it at my fingertips right now. And so that shift in the pandemic to on-demand learning allowed people to say, I need resources and tools for learning that I can grab right away and use right away. So that started a big shift in learning. It also started a shift of seeing much more what I call microlearning, or very small snippets of development. Think 3 minutes, 5 minutes, even 7 would count, where I want to learn a new skill, but I don't have a lot of time because we know how busy most professionals are, all professionals are. And so as much as we want to learn, we can't always give several hours. And so that started a rise of microlearning. So you're seeing much more shorter resources, relevant resources, and resources and learning that I can grab that are very different from sitting in a classroom all day. We still have a space. It's just not as big of a space as it did.
I saw the same change. So my company has always been virtual, but our clients have not.
Mm-hmm.
We're suddenly getting phone calls and having meetings with people saying, we have to figure out how to take this in-person 3-week class and put it online. And how do we do this? And our facilitators aren't trained to teach online. And what do we with a lot of change?
A lot of change. It was even a big change in the skill set shift from in-person to online was much more than I anticipated it being. I remember at the time, leading a group that primarily delivered in person and thinking, oh, it'll be easy for us to transition our skill set online. And it's not necessarily that it was hard. It was just more of it being a different skill set. And for some, it was learning technology in a new way, learning how to engage a virtual audience. And then it was just a shift in how we deliver and how learning looks. And so that's all been a bit more of a shift than I initially would have told you I thought it would be at the beginning of the pandemic. And that's continued, 5 years in.
Yes, agreed completely. We also saw the rise of new roles, like the virtual classroom producer has been around for decades, but suddenly there's a huge demand for them in 2020.
Oh, no doubt. The role that we didn't necessarily know we needed if you were already in the virtual space became the role that you couldn't live without. And that happened very quickly. Talk about a skill set that you could really, really flourish in. That would be a great example of it.
Yes, absolutely. So heading into the future now, where do you see learning and development going from here?
Ooh. I want to answer this in a couple ways because of course, the first thing that pops into my head is the impact of AI. But I'm actually not going to start there because where I see it headed is a continued focus on efficiency. And I know I've mentioned this a bit, but give me what I need right when I need it. Company, whatever that looks like. And that can look like many different things. And two would be a continued focus on behavior change. And that's been around for a long time. You've always assumed that if I learn something, my behavior changes. But that's not always necessarily the case. I can have a really good experience in a learning setting and not go and do anything with it. And I think that expectation has shifted and is shifting as companies invest in learning. The expectation is I learn something and there's an impact to that. I go and I do something different because of the investment that my organization made. So I think you're going to continue to have this accountability to learning outcomes and that behavioral change and the impact on the ROI on the organization. So thinking there kind of along the lines of measurement and how do we show the impact of learning. But then if I pivot, it has to be AI. AI has been so exciting because AI has become this tool that has delivered learning in new and different ways. I can type in a learning need in some platforms and it's going to automatically recommend things to me. It's a very exciting time for AI to be a tool for learning. And so I'm just happy to be along for the ride to see how it continues to make learning more relevant, more efficient, more effective. One of the bigger impacts I have seen is AI coaching. And what I'm seeing with AI coaching as a learning resource is that AI coaching allows you, and if you don't know what it is, I'll give you just a quick snippet, especially for our listeners here. AI coaching would be that I can go into an on-demand learning platform and I can say, I want help with this type of conversation, or I'm having this conversation, let's role play it. And I can either type in and role play a conversation with an AI coach, or I can speak the conversation and get feedback. So I'm either role playing in the sense of talking back and forth with a bot and practicing the conversation, or I'm getting feedback on what I'm saying and how I can tweak that. That is game changing because it allows people, it doesn't matter what role you're in. It doesn't matter if you're a manager or an employee, individual contributor, doesn't matter. It gives us all a safe space to practice skills that we didn't get to practice before necessarily. Some did, but it gives you this psychologically safe space to try to have difficult conversations and hone that skill set without being in front of that person. So I think AI coaching is going to continue to explode, and then AI as far as delivering relevant content.
So that's a lot.
I know. We're multiple places with that one, huh?
I was literally just having lunch with someone yesterday and they're like, I don't know how to keep up with all these changes happening.
Yeah.
And I was, you really have to get connected in these days to keep up to date. But I heard a lot of interesting things that you said. Number one, when you were talking about the accountability for the behavior change, you not only said, the learning department has accountability for creating that ROI, but you also said the learner is starting to have responsibility when they go to company paid training to have a behavior change.
That's right.
That's exciting. I haven't been in the corporate role in quite a while, and that was not the case way back then. So I love to hear that. That's interesting. But then, of course, you're talking about the AI coaching. So I actually don't have, a formal AI coaching tool to use, but I've definitely used my AI tools with, okay, here's the situation and I have to have a conversation. This is the outcome I want. How do I have this conversation? And it does help a lot. It helps you frame your thoughts ahead of time. And I've definitely been working with someone on developing a custom GPT for something you could use while you're in a meeting and just, type in the question that's been asked and it'll give you some information. I don't know if that'll be a distraction or not, but I think it's just the beginning of what we'll be able to do with things.
That's right.
It's amazing what people are doing today with AI.
Oh, it's really exciting. And you see it in a couple spaces. You see some organizations that have an on-demand learning platform. Maybe it's Skillsoft, Coursera, LinkedIn Learning, just anything that I can go and grab a quick on-demand program to walk myself through. Those are already incorporating AI coaching. But even if you don't have access to that, we all typically have access to OpenAI, like a chat GPT. And that can serve in the same way, just like you just described it, Leanne, is I need to have this conversation, help me role play it, or what does good sound like? And so you're able to take those real experiences, that experiential learning, that learning on the job, and then use a tool like AI to help hone your skill set. Just something we didn't have a few years ago, and it's really, really exciting.
It is. It's very exciting. Well, let's shift gears for a minute and can you tell us about who has been your most influential professional mentor?
Oh, I'm going to think about this one for a minute because I've got a few people that come to mind. And if we're being real, because I know this podcast is very transparent, it's very raw, it's very real. Just like anyone who's listening, I've had bad bosses and I've had great mentors. And I think that you learn from all of those because you learn what's important to you. You learn what you value. You learn how your belief set. So there's a lot to learn from the positive and negative interactions you have with nearly everyone in your career. I think there are two really strong female mentors that have stood out to me. And I'm not calling them out necessarily because they're female, but they are. So part of the description. The first one really she taught me how to hone my natural skill set, to be really thoughtful about what I bring to the table and to stop dismissing why I was at the table. Because it's so easy, especially if you're new in a professional environment, it is so easy to minimize your role while you're at the table or assume that you think the same as everyone else, and you don't. Everyone has something so unique to give. So what she really helped me hone in on was what my natural talent was and how to get over my imposter syndrome, and recognize why I'm at the table and share my thoughts and ideas. That was tough because I want to people please. I want to hide at times. I'm human just like anyone else. And if you want to get ahead, especially in a corporate environment, you have to be willing to put yourself out there, tell your story, share your thoughts and ideas, and that can be really difficult. So that was mentor number one. Mentor number two was my director about 6 years ago, and my natural instinct is I want to be in the weeds. I want to be in all the details. And I was applying for my first director role. And when you think about that level in an organization, you have to be much more strategic. And that was not my natural skill set. So she taught me how to, and this was through brilliant questions and coaching. I don't even think I recognized she was doing it at the time. She taught me how to think strategically, how to think from what does my organization need down to what is the learning solution that might impact that business need. Because it's so easy in learning and development to go, ooh, there's a new shiny class that we can offer. But if the organization doesn't truly have a need, you're not doing justice to the company. So she taught me how to think very strategically. And I am consistently grateful for that. Matter of fact, I texted her last week and said, thank you. You taught me this 6 years ago, and I'm teaching it to my team of directors today. Because I also think that mentors don't necessarily know the impact that they've had unless you take the time to go back and tell them, because they're human too. They probably have their own mentor. So just a couple of very standout mentors that taught me what I needed when I needed it in my career. And I'm grateful for that.
They do sound like influential and helpful mentors. You took me back to when I was in my 20s when you were describing your first mentor. I was like, what I wouldn't have given to have someone helping me along that route, because you're so much less sure of yourself early in your career, and you're often very hesitant, or even, like you said, feel like an imposter and you don't want to speak up.
Yes.
I remember feeling exactly that way then. Of course, be old like me, and you just, whatever's in your head just comes right out of your mouth and you don't think about it. But I did it.
Less and less.
The filter is going away quickly. I took one of my mentees out to dinner a few months ago. We met for dinner, and she started regurgitating back to me these things that I had taught her. And I'm like, really? I taught you this? Like, wow. I was amazed at how much she had gained from me, and I had no idea. I was like, wow.
Yeah, doesn't that feel good though? And you deserved that validation to have someone tell you the impact that you made on them. That's phenomenal.
Yes, it was a really good feeling. And she came to me right out of college, and I was mentoring her, and now she's a director at a major Fortune 100 company. I feel like proud mama here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You could almost say, you did that. That's because of you.
I didn't do it. She did it.
She did it. But how fun would it be to say, you're welcome. I did that. I'm just kidding.
She did it. But yeah, she was the one who sought out a mentor. I mean, that's the first step.
That is so true. That is so true. You made me just think of something that was a really good piece of advice, kind of under the umbrella of mentor, is I had someone ask me very early on in my career, who's on your board of directors? Who's at your boardroom table? And at that point in time, I'm like, what? I took that very legitimately. I thought, wow, boardroom table. And they're like, no, who are this? Be strategic about who you surround yourself with in your career. Who's someone you can go to for advice? Who will tell you your blind spots? Who will support you? And so it's being really strategic, thoughtful, relationship builder, but not forget as you move through your career how important it is to be intentional about those people. I think that's huge.
I think it is. And I have recently been hearing that phrase as well. Who's your board of directors? And I'm like, I don't have one.
Well, especially as we continue on in our career, it's easy to become the board of directors for others and lose sight of our own. And it's a good reminder even for me. I think if I thought about it today, I'm not sure I would be, not pleased, I'm not sure that I would be surrounded by the people that I'm being intentional about it right now. I think I have an opportunity to constantly be intentional. And sometimes you just get so head down in the work you're doing that you got to pop back up and go, ooh, I need to look at that again. It's been a while.
So great advice. Great advice for anyone out there trying to get into L&D. Get a mentor, get a board of directors, get get people who can advise you and help you along the path.
Yeah.
I'm going to shift gears again. What do you think is the most important skill right now in the workplace?
Ooh, okay. All right. You're asking really great questions. And if you'd asked me this a few years back, I would have said, oh, the skill set's constantly shifting and changing. And I would call out, especially over the last few years, change is the constant. So I'm gonna give an honorable mention here to resilience and change management. However, that's not my answer. My answer is one that some of my former employees would make fun of me for saying this to you, but I will stand by this as one of the top skills I think it's important to have, regardless of your level, your role, your industry. And I call it stakeholder management. And I know this is going to seem silly, but I think it is game changing. It is your ability. I'm trying to think about how to best define this. Your ability to identify and engage with people who have interest in or impacted by your work. So this is different from a mentor. A mentor is really, for me, is to here to guide my journey, my career. Stakeholder management is really intentionally thinking about the work you do. Who does it impact? Who do I need to think about? Who do I need to communicate this to? Who do I need to partner with? And establishing and building those really productive relationships. I think that is absolutely critical, because if you miss that, you can do incredible work and you're missing a piece because you haven't thought about engaging your stakeholders, connecting with your stakeholders. So that's a really, really key piece. I'm going to add in one more second honorable mention, and it's your good old communication skills. Because we know we've got tools like AI. We know that we've got tools that are helping make our work more efficient and more effective. Nothing can take the place of your ability to communicate. And if I could give anyone listening 2 quick pieces of advice, it's to focus on being able to communicate your thoughts very clearly and simply. And it's also to not be afraid of a conversation where someone might have a difference of opinion than you. Those are some of the best, most insightful conversations that you can be in. So be curious, ask questions. Don't be afraid of what you might deem a difficult conversation. But if you could focus your time and energy, communication skills and people skills, those will never, never be replaced by AI.
Those are some great skills. Absolutely. I would agree. Resilience is something that we've had to build as a skill in the last few years. The resilience just to get through the shutdown was, a big one. And now, of course, we're being hit with all these changes again and again and again. I love the communication one. Of course, that's the one I've been hearing for my lifetime in corporate L&D is communication. So I'm glad to hear that nobody thinks it's going away as a really strong skill.
No one tells you what it means, too. That's why I try to break it down into a couple of key skills. Is communication is this massive umbrella that I can get overwhelmed if someone's like, build that. I'm like, what do you mean? I don't know. Where do I start? But if you can break it down into a few key things, like clearly articulating what you need to say versus asking questions of others, you can break down that umbrella into really actionable, relevant learning that you can slowly pace yourself and develop in.
Yes, absolutely. So shifting gears again, what is your favorite source for industry news and information?
I like to keep my pulse on what I call kind of the bigger sources for learning and development. So of course your ATD or your Association for Talent Development, they're a great source to connect with peers, to get a pulse on where learning is and where it's going. You can also have there's classes. I mean, they're kind of a good one-stop shop for all things learning and development. Sure, or the Society for Human Resources. I also like Harvard Business Review. I think that's a good one too. And then Gartner. I think there's a lot of great research that's done by Gartner. I would tell you, though, that as much as I love, and I will intentionally put time on my calendar weekly to check those kind of industry news and sources. But I think as a learning and development professional, it's my responsibility to keep pulse in my own organization by talking to people. So I'm constantly, not necessarily a formal focus group, but I'm constantly talking to people. What are you learning? How are you getting your learning? What resources are you using? What resources do you need? Because if you really listen as much as we can, because the organization I'm with is incredibly big. So you can't always, I certainly can't ask everyone, but if I intentionally keep a pulse there, your employees and your leaders will tell you what they need. They will tell you what the business needs. And then you can go and try to figure out what's the best way to solve for it. And is learning even a solve for it? Because sometimes it's not.
So great advice. I recall that back before everybody went virtual, there was, the coffee room or the water cooler, places like that where you could go to the break room and talk to people and just hear what's going on, or go to the cafeteria that they have or something like that and just meet people from different parts of the organization and just learn. But virtually, it's much harder to do.
It's much harder. It has to be much more intentional, right? Because you're building the space. You have to build the space and the time rather than have it come to you by proximity where it can in the workspace or people are walking by and they're close. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Okay, last question. And this one is for me because this is where I get my reading list. What is the one book that everyone wanting to move into L&D leadership should read?
Okay, I love this question because I love to ask the same question and build my own reading list from this. So we're just going to have to share reading lists. I've got a few of my favorites behind me, but ironically, the one I want to tell you about, I've loaned out. So it's not on the shelf behind me. And it might be a surprising one too. Several years back, I was able to attend the ATD, or Association for Talent Development conference. Their keynote speaker was an author named Priya Parker. And Priya, her book is called The Art of Gathering. Have you read it yet?
No.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Because I initially heard it and went, well, how does this apply in learning and development? And it is so applicable, not only personally, but professionally. So it's this beautiful book that you can apply in different places in your life. But Priya talks about how to and how not to thoughtfully connect with people. When does it make sense to gather people? When does it make sense not to? How can you be intentional about it? And how do you, and I know this sounds a little uncomfortable, how do you exclude when you need to and how do you include when you need to? So that you're maximizing the purpose of the gathering. I love it. I think about it when I hold gatherings in my home, but certainly, we all have, what was the latest research? Like 6 to 8 meetings a day. Some have many more. If we think about these all as gatherings, there is so much intentionality we can gather from her work. So if you do nothing else, Priya's got a newsletter that is one of the few things that comes into my inbox externally that I always read and is always packed with thoughtful tips. So you can go to Priya's website and sign up for the newsletter and get the book, watch her TED Talk. It's really, really insightful. And then, Leanne, you have to give me your book list too. You'll have to tell me things.
Well, my book list, we've been doing this podcast for coming close to 2 years. So I've got a really long book list from asking this question every week. I'll be happy to share that with you, no problem. And that will do a reference to Priya's TED Talk website and book in the show notes so that anybody who's really interested can find them.
Priya, if you're listening, you're welcome.
Yes.
She's way too famous for that.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I can't wait. So what I do, I'm a big buy it on Audible person.
Yes.
And I listen to it while I'm walking or doing, chores around the house or something. It's a good time to just absorb a book. And then if there's things that I'm going to want to reference later, that's when I buy the hard copy and mark what things I want to look to later.
Perfect approach. And one of my favorite tools too, because I love, 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 love dabbling in all different kinds of books and podcasts and audiobooks. But sometimes it's taking the time to realize if it's a valuable book, right? So we get into it and sometimes it's great and life-changing. Sometimes it's not. I've gotten really engaged in tools like Blinkist or Get Abstract. So if you're listening, Blinkist is a tool where it's like condensed summaries of books, podcasts, research articles, and you can grab it and you can kind of like soak it in 5 to 10 minutes, and it will give you enough about that resource to say, should I buy it? Or should I spend, 8 hours, give or take, of my time to absorb that information? And so there's so many great tools out there that'll help you grab a few more things off the shelf, determine if they're for you, and, take away some of those key action items too.
Mhm. I subscribed to Blinkist for a couple of years, and you got a good, just like you said, 5 to 10 minutes. I could go through 2 of them on a walk. 2, major books that maybe somebody referenced in the podcast, and listen to them and see if I would buy it or not.
Yeah, and then if you want to buy it and spend more time on it, but you're not going in blind. You're going in knowing like this should probably be valuable or give me the insights that I'm looking for. I love efficiency. That feels so efficient. I love it.
It is, and there's, we have so much information at our fingertips now that it's overwhelming. So
Yes.
anybody who can truncate it down and make it easier to digest so that you can, say, okay, I have enough about this book, I'm going to move on. It's nice.
We need a Blinkist for TV shows and movies because there's so much good stuff out there, and I need someone to tell me whether I'm going to like something. So that's what you and I are going to build together after this.
All right. That sounds like a good podcast.
Ooh. Okay, done.
Sounds great. Well, you have been a delightful guest. I knew you would be, Chrissy. Thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation with you so much. And I appreciate everyone who's listening. And I hope that you continue your career in learning and development and have all the confidence in the world to know the impact that you're making.
What a wonderful closing statement. As our thank you to you, Chrissy, we're going, our charity at Training Pros is planting trees in the world. We have planted over 5,000 trees to date, and we're going to plant 5 more in your name as our thank you to you.
Thank you so much. That's fantastic.
You're welcome. And that's it for this week's episode of Learning Leaders Spotlight. We hope you enjoyed our discussion today. And if you tune in next week, you'll hear from another learning leader from another industry.
Thanks for joining us for the latest episode of Learning Leaders Spotlight, interviews with corporate L&D leaders. You'll find links in the show notes to any resources mentioned on today's show. If you're enjoying our podcast, please subscribe so you never miss an episode and leave us a 5-star review.